What's up, everyone? Welcome back for our monthly Fireside with A&A episode. I'm obviously Adnan. Abby's here. Abby here.
Hello, I am here.
Yes, I've tracked her down, so she's back for a conversation where I don't even know where this is going to go, but we are back for a full conversation. So before we start, as always, as well, if you enjoy the content, please subscribe, turn on notification, like the video, share with your friends. Get to keep up to date with all these episodes, get to keep up to date with all the other content we produce on podcasts, interviews, discussions, everything to keep you occupied. Abby, how are you? You've had a pretty rough start to 2025, as you've told me, because we speak a lot of voice notes, and I think you've been really unwell, and we might hear a couple of coughs during this chat, but how have you been?
Wait a second, you mean you let me speak?
Just about.
Yeah, we're referring to...
I'm not sure if you should talk. Oh, sorry. No, go on. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, Adnan does let me speak, you guys. Don't worry. Yeah, but I had a rough start to 2025. I got sick on December 30th, and I'm like just turning a corner now, a month later. So good times.
Am I allowed to talk now?
Yes, you are.
Right. Okay. I also, as well, I will just say as well, you're the last person who wouldn't let me, like, if I was talking over you, you have enough bite back to, like, say your piece as well. So it's like, I expect you to, like, voice your opinion. Imagine if I came on here as, like, trying to punch down and you'd be punching back up. It's like, come on. Yeah. I think that's one of those, like, lost things as well. And I do it myself when I do the editing. I'm like, sometimes I'm watching it, I'm like, Adam, you should really shut me up at this point. Like, please shut me up. And it's like, just shut me up. And it's like, no, he just lets me talk. And I'm like, all right, okay. But hey, that's what makes good chemistry and good vibes, if anything. But no, on your point, well, at least you're on the mend. That's the main thing, because we've got a full year ahead of us of good episodes to follow up on, a lot of different things to talk about Life is Strange, Deck 9, Don't Nod, Square, everything. There's all kinds of things to talk about. Where do you feel you want to start? Is there anything picking at your mind?
We can start in a couple of places, and you can let me know your thoughts. We can start on the Deck 9 layoffs. I'm not sure how much we touched on that last time, because I'm not sure how much had happened when we last recorded. We could talk about Lost Records and how excited we are to play that. We could talk about comments.
You took those ones, didn't you?
Yeah. Let me know where you want to start.
There's quite a few interesting ones. Should we start with Deck 9, at least, for the time being?
Yeah.
Might be a logical step to take. So obviously we are now, like, post-layoff period. Obviously it's quite horrible to see people get laid off before Christmas because of where the industry shuts down. And obviously it's always horrible to see people lose their jobs, but there are, like, obviously the repercussions have been felt for the game. I think the estimate I had, like, last time I counted, was like 19 people that got, like, laid off their jobs. I think it's well higher than that as well. I think it's like 20 plus that got laid off. And obviously key creatives that were laid off on that as well. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time, obviously, because, like, we're going to go into a quiet period with, like, Deck 9 and what they're doing and what they're working on. God only knows what they're making, I didn't know how Double Exposure ended, so we have no idea what's going to happen next. I'm joking before someone jumps on me. But yeah, I think that it's weird, because obviously I have very polarizing views on this game, say the least, and you enjoyed this game.
I really liked it.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like a good balance as well. And this is why I always kind of like this channel as well, because it's like I bring you on even though you have different views, so it adds nice dynamics as well. Because if I was that, like, stubborn and cynical and whatever else, I could just, like, shut the conversation down and be like, well, I just think it's this. But there are interesting points to take away, and I think I got that from your last conversation as well. I think there were certain points in the story where it does work, but there was, like, a lot of flaws that were exposed on the project, no pun intended on that. But how do you feel about the studio going forward? Because me and Adam have talked quite a lot about it, and in that as well, I kind of, like, talked about my directors that I'd want to go into the chair. We even brought up Chris Floyd, because you said to me off podcast, thinking like that's an option. But how do you feel about it, and where do you see this going?
I still love Deck Nine. I thought that the narrative, especially the banter components between the characters, was very strong. It felt very authentic, especially with a lot of characters of diverse backgrounds. Like you had a lot of queer characters. That to me felt like it was coming from a very authentic place in terms of the writing. Um, but like we talked about last time, I think that parameters were not necessarily set on the mechanics. So like Max's powers kept growing exponentially.
Yeah.
In ways that like didn't necessarily make sense. Or the rewind came in again. You were saying if what was his name? The police officer.
Oh, Alderman.
Alderman, yeah. So like if he caught you in Moses's lab, then you could somehow suddenly rewind. So
Yeah.
I didn't love that, and I felt like they kind of wrote themselves into a corner come the end of full exposure. But um, yeah, I mean, it sucks, and I feel terrible for the folks who lost their livelihoods, especially right before the holidays. So I'm interested to see where it goes, and I mean, at least we have the great performance direction still intact. So
Where Pickers Gill delivers, as he always does, and I've said this before. I spoke about it. I can't remember where I spoke about it, but I said like the Deck Nine games, the last three, The Expanse, True Colors, and Double Exposure, the strongest thing across the entire board has been the performance direction by both performance directors. And they both showed every time that they were working with the actors and under different conditions, especially with like, The Expanse was done under SAG protocols. Obviously, Double Exposure wasn't because SAG actors weren't necessarily involved in that. But like the different dynamics and the stories they were telling, whatever the writing was, whatever the quality of the entire games were, and I think the writing was better in in The Expanse anyway. But I think like the writing, the quality, it was quite clearly shown in terms of the performance direction, and they were the strongest points as well because you have two really great performance directors that worked on those projects. And you got it with Double Exposure because I think like I could see it as well. Like, and you're right as well. They boxed themselves into corners, not just Deck Nine, but also Square Enix. It was a decision made by both of them because you can't write stories like that and then like. So one of my issues is as well, and here's the thing with like going forward and a sequel and stuff. With going forward as a sequel, the one thing that's problematic with Double Exposure, among many other things, even like obviously like Alderman, for example, if you did a sequel, you could just bin that off. It's like it's a whatever point, isn't it? It still feels cheap. People would still raise it up as a criticism, saying you never really explained it, but you can kind of get away with that. In Double Exposure, the one thing that they did, which was Cardinal Sin 101, and which has led to the divisiveness of the game as well, is that you destroyed law. So you established new laws. So you said, for example, Max and Chloe split up. That is law defining. That is going to antagonize and annoy a lot of people because you do dilute the choice of the other game. If you go down the other ending of the game and you try and sell the story, it does tell better. People have said that as well, and it does thematically fit a bit better. But unfortunately, you can't do that with this game because it's built on two different endings. Unless you say that this game isn't canon, which they should have done, saying that this is one story in an infinite universe of possibilities, you can get away with it, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So what they did with that as well, and it kind of expands your boxing yourself into corners point, it's that. So basically what they did was they boxed themselves into corners, especially from the lore standpoint, and then that's kind of like caused even more criticism on the game. And it's like the lore criticism is on top of like Max's trauma and how they deal with that. And I speak from this experience because I'm currently like training to be a counselor. And it's like I'm just sitting there thinking like, I'm like, is this someone really dealing with mental health? Are you really telling this? And I've had other people who've gone through those experiences talking about mental health issues, and they're like, I don't really see how this is like working in terms of people deal with it in different ways. But I'm like, it needs just like one or two components kind of make it feel a bit more believable. And I think they did box themselves into corner in strategic plot points. And like, obviously, again, like I've said before, the overarching theme of the game, which is the murder mystery, is just lost beyond belief. Like it just, I will. Have you ever watched Family Guy, American Dad?
Yes, that is something I actually have watched.
Yeah,
Finally.
there's a moment. There's a moment where what's the girl called now? Haley is walking up into the attic where Roger is, and Roger stays in the attic, and Roger's hanging from a
Yeah.
noose, and she sees him. That's me when I can't figure out the plot of this game because I'm like, how did we get to the thematic point of Double Exposure where you couldn't work out who specifically killed Safi because you've rewritten it so many times and you've boxed yourself into all these corners that there's no logical explanation for it. And it's not just from the narrative standpoint, it's like the narrative team, but it's also like the publisher standpoint as well, what they were doing. Like, they're working under parameters here. So yeah, I think like in itself, and I can't remember where the conversation started, if anything. I was very specific quite a few times. I was like, I don't want to keep kicking a dead horse. I even said off the podcast with Adam, I was like, at one point, I was like, we're gonna have to talk about this game at some point again, because like I've got a topic that's really important for us to talk about. Because like it's just you can't ignore it, because it in itself as well, and the simple way I do it as well. Double Exposure made history for all the wrong reasons when it should have done it for the right reasons. And could you have told a story after the events of the first game? Yes, you could have done, because they did it with the comics, and they did things smartly in the comics to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. Are the comics still flawed? Yes, of course they are. They have flaws in it. Everything has flaws in it. The first Life is Strange game has flaws in it as well. But it balanced things a lot more strategically. This game just didn't. And it's shown in the sales. It's shown in the layoffs. And that's like, for me, the argument that I've always stuck with now is like, for me, when people say like, you're being too harsh, and I'm like, if it was that damn good of a game, you wouldn't have laid off every creative in the key roles in this position, because like, who really survived it? Where Pickersgill was one, for example, because he's the performance director. Did they cut him off? No, because he delivered on his side in that thing. Yeah, he completely delivered. If anyone came up to me and said like, well, the performance, I'm like, no, not a chance in hell. I'm like, this guy has like nailed it out of the ballpark. And it's the same with The Expanse. I'm like, nailed it out of the ballpark. They did what they did. They worked within the thing. And even the actors as well, they worked with what they had. So it's like, I can't fault someone coming on and like playing certain characters. And it's like, it's just a shame, because like we talked about Olivia Alabasti, me and you a couple of times. I'm like, Safi just gets flown under the radar now because of the story they told of her and how they wrote her. And it's like, if she'd just been her own character and a bit more kind of like exposition, a bit more kind of layered to her, maybe we had something a bit more for her, and maybe she would get more of the limelight as she should. But a lot of it does fall on Hannah Tell. That's the thing, I think, like, and it does rightfully fall on Hannah Tell, because she carries the story in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's one of those. I feel sorry for the people that lost their jobs, because everyone feels sorry for any person from a human standpoint. But I did say previously, and it looked quite horrible in some of the review episodes, I did say, I was like, these people need to get off this project completely. And it's like whatever, like, for me, because people have said it before, it's like, I have no hope for the future. I'm very much on that cynical standpoint, but also I'm like 99% there, because I'm like, there's 1% of margin error for me, because it's like, maybe there's someone out there who's a genius writer who can do something that I can't see, and they can work something into it. You've already caused all kinds of damage from it, but maybe someone can fix it if they're smart enough. Who that person is, I don't know. But I'm also interested in the project in itself, just because of, you now have a fresh start with a new creative team, and maybe they can try and fix something. I don't know how you feel.
I don't know. I think at this point they could just put in a few patches almost. Like, something that really bothered me, and y'all know that I'm stuck on this point, is that when Max goes back in time through the picture to get to the spot where she almost is shooting Safi, she's not in that picture. And the mechanic is such that Max has to be in frame in order for her to jump back. So like, go patch it and put her reflection in the well or whatever, or the fountain, whatever that thing was. So that gives at least a reason, and then set a parameter there for how far back in time have the worlds collided, because now, is Chloe alive if you chose the Bay ending? Is Rachel Amber alive? Like, how far back are we going to where the two worlds are combined here?
Fair point. And the same with the power thing, they did need set parameters. They lost all control of parameters, and I think that's a bad decision. It's like with Emma's comic writing, if you ever read the comics, it's like there's parameters. She understands what her characters are doing. And with this one, for example, they scrapped a power, which they've talked about in an interview, and it's like, okay, the power felt completely unethical in terms of an idea. And it's like, it's good that it was scrapped, but again, you're expanding yourself too much. It's like, she already has an incredible power, which is rewind. Just tweak it or develop it or add something. Just use the shift and the emotions. That's all you need to do. The pulse thing, it's like, those are too good enough as it is. It's like, you don't need to add 3 or 4, 5, 6 powers to it. She's just Max. She's just a character who has a power. It's like, the powers aren't important to the story. It's just about progressing the story. It's about her, if anything, which I agree with you on that point, if anything. The timeline one as well, that's their saving grace for me, personally speaking. So if
Yeah.
I was like going to address this and like go into the creative team, I'm like, your only saving grace that the previous narrative team, however I feel about them, have left you with a saving grace is the fact that they merged the timelines. But it's like also as well, it leaves you in a really tricky position because me and Adam talked about Chloe Price and that as well. And even Adam's like repeatedly one saying like, don't ask for it because it's like, you know what's going to happen if it happens. And you should have a little bit of sense of like dread. Cause it's like, if you felt really hard done by Max as well, and the way they treat Chloe in this game, it's like, what happens if they do bring her back just because of the fan feedback and stuff? Can they really write her? Will they make her what she is? Like, it's one of those things where you think like the worst could, we think we've seen the worst, but it could easily get worse. But when you're saying about the timelines, if anything, the only thing that saves it for me is the fact that Chloe Price exists in both timelines and you mention her in the game.
Yeah.
And if the timelines merge, there will be a Chloe Price in some aspect, some kind of form. And you never really allude to what the timelines are in terms of, is it just a mind thing? Can someone get ripped out of a timeline? Again, these are unanswered questions. So you have like a saving grace there, but it's like, at that point, can you fix it? Or are you going to fix it? Or are you going to take that road? Because it's like, they've dug their heels in. The only thing for me as well at this point as well, if they bring Max back as well, the only thing they can do is damage control it and try and give a satisfying ending in some kind of way, shape, or form to her story. Because what the tragic thing for me with Max as well at the minute is, even though I can always just appreciate Max from Life is Strange 1 and even Life is Strange 2 with like the story that they tell, it's the fact that this game has a story which has really divided people and people feel let down by it. And it's like, that's not the ending you want for this character either, to be in that position where the character is just got a very unsatisfying follow-up story. Do you continue it though? Do you create more of a train wreck, or do you fix it? Can you do the unthinkable and defy expectations? About 15 million questions go through my head every day about Life is Strange and about Max and about this game, about Deck 9. It's like, can you...
The state that it's in right now, they cannot leave it in. I think that Double Exposure can be kind of the campy, wonky second game in, well, I guess it's technically the third game in this particular Arcadia Bay Chloe Max universe. But yeah, they can definitely turn it around. And now you have, if you want to bring some of those characters back, like Chloe, you have already the story arc written for you that, they were kind of on bad terms as they were broken up, or she died and now she has to deal with the fact that Max didn't choose her. Right. So they have it written for them and they have all of these problems already created, along with all of the other hanging threads that we have from like Diamond and obviously Safi. So
it's like, you're like one thing after another. Sorry, when you mention it, it's like, you're like, oh, I can deal with this, but then you're like, oh, and this and that and that, and I'm like, I can see it in Yabi. I'm like, you understand like what you're dealing with here.
Yeah, well, take all of the loose threads you have, list them, and then set the parameters a priori. Like Diamond apparently has powers, so set her powers and then write the story within those parameters. Like that's the whole challenge of writing a video game, is that you can't just keep like snowballing into, oh, I want to write this situation, so I'd better have them create this power in their arsenal. Like, I don't know. That's kind of just the basis of video game writing, is that they have a power and you have to work within that.
Well, you'd hope that, wouldn't you? But it's like that's where it gets like lost in this game, doesn't it? It's like when Alex Chen exists in True Colors, her power is being empathy. And it's like she can feel it, but then it, doesn't evolve into like 4 or 5 different things. Max's power just keeps going and going and going in this game. And it's like, hang on a minute, maybe we do what you said, where you reel it in and you keep parameters in place and kind of keep that focus on it in itself. And it's funny you mentioned the fact that you'd go back and tweak things, like add things that would probably make a bit more sense, if anything.
Yeah.
I will ask you this question.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No.
I was going to say, like, add a scene where Max is going down into her little photography or into her dark room for the first time, and like have Hannah like voice over some thoughts that are like, oh, this is, really unsettling to me. It makes me, and then it all leads to the finale scene where she's trapped in the bowling alley in Mr. Jefferson's torture chamber.
But it's a fair point though, because again, these are the criticisms that I raised about the game, where it's like, you get to the ending of the game and you get that entire like dark room sequence that they're trying to replicate, but it's like the payoff doesn't really feel it. It's like there were certain scenes you could have included in the game if I was writing it, where it's like, as you said, that sequence where she goes downstairs and she feels that. You could have even had a sequence when she's in the dark room, when she's asleep, she wakes up, and even in itself, if you want to add like a little bit of a horror element, Jefferson's standing behind her. She flips around and sees that no one's there. So it's an apparition of things that she's seeing. One of the most powerful scenes they could have included, for example, in the game, is a counseling sequence. So she goes into the counselor's office at Caledon University, sits down in a chair, and does flashbacks. So it basically gives feedback to people who haven't played the game, can start seeing things, connecting the dots. There are games that I've played in the past which are very smart. For Metal Gear Solid is a big one, where it's like you bounce lore history of a previous game off another character. So it's like, for example, she could.
We discussed.
We talked about. Yeah, so it's like those are the kind of like things that could have worked out well from it. I'm going to ask you something. I'm not going to give my verdict on it because it's a topic I want to bring up with Adam as well. But I am interested to see what you think of it, because obviously where you're suggesting things where it's like fix this, which I think a lot of people would agree with is fine. It would be very hard for them to go and do that now, considering the timeline of things. And it's like you kind of put your hands up, being like, made a bit of a mistake here, thingy. The big question I have for you as well: would you retcon the game if you had the chance?
No, I would get the new writing team to make a small DLC. I wouldn't retcon the game itself, but I would do some kind of addition, especially in this interim period. We presume there will be a next game because it says it ends with Max Caulfield will return. So I would create some kind of like stopgap to explain some of the things that were left hanging. And then go from there.
So with the DLC as well, would you rather explain what's happened that we didn't explain, or would you use it as a springboard for the next game? Or would you try and do both?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
And make it a little cheap DLC, like they did almost with Captain Spirit. Although that one wasn't
I miss those days.
Yeah.
I miss those days. That was such a nice little spin-off that they did. We don't talk about Captain Spirit enough as it was. That was such a cool little spin-off you had, and then it kind of bled into the actual game, which was quite nice. Yeah, it's interesting you wouldn't retcon it. It's a big conversation I think a lot of people have with this game now. Obviously, the game would still exist. You'd kind of just preface it by the fact of saying that it's not canon, if anything. But no, it's an interesting conversation to be had, because I think a lot of how divided the game is, it's shown as well. And I'm still trying to gauge if people actively more dislike this game, or they love it. Because if you go on different platforms, i.e. like TikTok, or you go on Twitter and Facebook, etc., and different platforms, you see different reactions. And I'm always kind of wondering, it's like the ones that I've been kind of exposed to are on my wavelength, where it's like, don't like the game, it has this issue, it has that issue. Then I have your perspective, where it's like, I like the game, but I also have X, Y, Z, A, B, C, these kind of things that I'm seeing. And then I see some people who just outright love the game. And it's like, I've read reviews, and I'm not as narrow-minded as other people. I do see why people like the game as well. I understand certain things of it. There are certain elements within the game that are good. I just think that overall the narrative fails in certain elements. And again, I think the big one for me is like lore and history. They don't really respect what they're doing with the characters. But no, I do find it interesting that you felt that way, where it's like you wouldn't retcon it. Because it's a big decision as well, and it's a big call with that. I think the big mistake they made was not to establish that this is just a possibility of a story to be told.
Yeah.
And even itself as well, I was just thinking like this: you could have told a story with both endings and done it just smartly enough, even if it's as cheap as it is, and you're like, Chloe has gone on a road trip because that's the lifelong dream she wanted to do, and to kind of like live out Rachel Amber's dream, because Rachel Amber never got to it, so she like wanted to just do a road trip. And through that as well, she encouraged Max to become a photographer and a proper teacher. So she's giving her feedback to go to Caledon. And then you tell that story via text messages, and that there's still a romantic connection or a friendship connection, however you see it, rather than doing what they did, which is break them up. Because breaking them up, if you're going to do that, you have to tell the game has to be built around those two characters. Like, it has to be built around them. And I think that's the issue you have, because it's like when you read the comics and you're seeing how Max and Chloe's story is told, for me, it really embodies a lot of the second Life is Strange game, where you have that photo that Sean finds. And Michel has said himself, Michel Coe, the co-director, co-creator of the franchise, he's always said, like, when you see that photo, it's like they're not smiling. And he's like, but it's probably more so because they understand they have to kind of get over this period as well together, because it's like, you know, you have the troughs and ups and downs. But I just we were laughing quite a while off podcast as well when I was talking to you about lesbian stuff and in general like sapphic relationships. But I'll say to you, I just found it like ironic as someone who's sitting there and I'm like, they played into one of the biggest cliches of all time, which is that they broke up one of the most iconic sapphic relationships of the last 10 years. And they made it in a way where they both like become really like volatile to each other. And I'm like, and it's like, because you were like, I love this kind of thing where you can like, if you are another way, it's like, you know, Amanda has this kind of relationship with Max, and it's like Safi has a kind of like thing with Max as well. It's like, ooh, these are really like potential good sapphic elements. But then I'm like, Abby, the other thing, it's like, I'm not even like a lesbian, but I'm like, I'm looking at this other relationship and I'm like, this is an elephant in the room that we just caused. And it's like, I can see why anyone who's on, who is that person is like looking at it and be like, I'm so deeply upset by it. I was joking to you about it as well, because I was watching Silo. I said to you, I was like, there's like at one point in the season, there's like a lesbian relationship introduced. And I was like, and Abby, what happens there? Well, the two people are broken up. And I'm like,
That's the way.
Yeah, and I'm like, just keep playing these stereotypes, keep playing these cliches, keep playing anything along those lines. I'm like, oh God.
Well, but if they want to make it really authentic, then have them break up and then have them get back together. Like that's just have it imitate real life, you know?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Honestly, I think I could write books about this game, and it would like still spin my head a little bit in terms of like, you know, decisions from like upper ups, like hierarchies, being like, oh, well, this was a good decision. And it's like, it's like, was it? It's like, was it? Did we really read the room here? Did we like feel out the right audiences? It's like, come on, man. It's like, it was such an easy, like, you know, goal to score with this game. And it's like, no, they messed it up. Which is a shame, because it's like, as I've always said as well before, it's like, if Life is Strange fails, we might never get anything like this ever again. And that's a shame for everyone.
We will not let it fail. Continue talking about it. Beg for
more. Well, it pains me one day. You know, I hope Adnan Jr. and Adam Jr. and Abby Jr. can all like sit on a podcast and follow on the legacy of this channel and like have discussions about the games and be like, well, they were all wrong about it. But it's weird, because even itself, I know some people have been like, I don't ever want Deck 9 to make another Life is Strange game. I don't want this to happen, this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. As I've equally distributed blame to Deck 9 for different things, I'm like, if Deck 9 goes and someone else comes in, I'm like, what? There's still the elephant's still in the room, you know? That's not going to change that thing, because it's like, we still have that one thing.
No, I wouldn't want Deck 9 to go, because then you'd lose the performance direction with it. And we were talking before that the performance direction, I think, in Life is Strange since Deck 9 took over is very unique, because to me, at least, it reads more like staged theater, right? Like the performance is, there's a physicality to it that I don't necessarily feel even in The Expanse or just like other full performance capture games that I've played.
It's built that way, isn't it? Like in itself as well. Like Webb was performance director on both last two games, and he was before the Storm's co-director. And like obviously the entire Tempest sequence, for example, and that kind of like stages that are kind of the physical application we want to give of the performances, and it shows in this game. It's just a shame, because like for me as well, it's like, and I know people feel differently, but like you get rid of Deck 9, it makes no difference for me, because like in the sense that Square Enix still exists, and as long as Square Enix exists, that's it. You know, publisher will make the final calls, won't it? It's like we see it with Lost Records, and we'll come inside in a conversation in a moment. But it's like, you know, they have more freedom because it's just them making it. But it's like, you know, I've always made this conversation before. It's like, you know, if Michel was working still at, is still working at Dontnod, but it's like, you know, they were working under Square Enix.
Yeah.
And he was like, I want to make a Life is Strange 2 sequel. And it's like, I got this great story where I want to tell Daniel's future. And he's like, he links up with Chris, and it's like all Square Enix has to turn around and say is like, we don't like that idea. We don't like Chris Erickson being there. Tell us something different. And then it's even more fun. It's even more wild, because you're thinking that guy created them. He's the co-creator of the franchise. He's a key architect on it, and you're telling him he can't have that idea. But that's what happens, isn't it, with businesses? You sell the IP away, you sell the characters away, etc., you're at the mercy, aren't you? So it's the same with the Don't Know team. Like, think about what they must be thinking when they're seeing what's happened in terms of the reaction. It's like Michelle had to come out and tell people not to send like death threats to people at Deck Nine, and like, he's like, I don't agree with this, but he's like, I can't do anything about it, can he? He's like, he's just someone who's watching from an observer standpoint at this point. It's hard. It's a hard position to put in, and it's like, it's just the same with Deck Nine. So if, like, for me, when people like get rid of Deck Nine, I'm like, you're fine with that, having your opinion, and fair enough. It's like, I really enjoy the performance capture, but I'm like, for me, you get rid of them and bring someone else in. Who are you going to bring in? Oh, cool, bring Night School Studio in from Oxenfree. Still, it's Square that's going to make the decisions. If they say, oh, we want to bring Alex Chen back, they're like, no, we don't want them. We don't like that. What are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do? Unless you're willing to fight your corner, which I think the Square, which Deck Nine should have done, and said, we're not going to tell the story because we don't like the fact that you're doing this to Chloe, because this is the relationship. This is what audiences think.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other issue, because you've seen the focus groups that they're doing, haven't you? Like the posts as well. They've been doing stuff about, like, we're doing a focus group on Life is Strange. We're doing surveys, and I'm like, death by surveys, death by focus groups. I keep using it in my phrase now. It's like, you focus grouped and surveyed your way into this position. You ain't going to get yourself out of it. The only thing that's going to get yourself out is it if you give creative freedom to a studio and be like, take the lead. And they don't, and it seems, if anything as well, it feels like they don't trust someone to do that. And that's not a good kind of opportunity as well, because it's like, you need to kind of let them have free picks of the characters, let them tell the story that needs to be told, but it doesn't.
Yeah, the focus group is a little strange to me this late in the process, because what are, like, okay, so you have the results, the qualitative results of this focus group.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it now that you've ostensibly also analyzed all of those surveys and stuff from, even going years back? Like, I don't know. I don't know how you would reconcile new data with what you have existing and what you have already in the pipeline. So Godspeed to that research and development team.
But I've also made the point as well with focus groups as well. What if I turned up to the focus group and I said that I hate Chloe Price?
They kick
I
you out.
absolutely no, but like, if I put in the feedback and I put it in there and said, I absolutely hate her, I despise her, I hate her guts, and I don't like her, and you watch this podcast thinking like, oh, actually, you really like the character, etc., etc., and I could say like, oh, I went there and did it for just the laughs, if anything, because that's what can happen though, because it's like, who's turning up to the focus groups, who's saying what, and then also as well, the big question is, and you've done surveys and researches and stuff like that, and I've done research as well with with groups as well. What data are you looking for, and what are they saying? So it's like when, when you watch like TV shows, like TV news channels, like and they're interviewing people on the streets, and they get like a quippy line from the public where it's like, oh, well, I hate the Republicans for doing this, or, oh, I hate the Democrats for doing this, and it's like, they snip them into their VT packages. The one question you have to ask yourself as well: how many people did they speak to in public to get that one line? And it's like, I used to do Vox Pops as well. I've done a couple of them. I once spoke to like 50 people on the street just to get 3 or 4 good segments of like, lines from people, just like the right kind of tone and what we were looking for in the news piece. Because think about the random public member you're going to speak to. Are they really going to deliver it on the first attempt? You might get it. You might be really lucky. Most chances, no, you're going to have to speak to a lot of freaking people to get it. And it's the same with this survey feedback, because they could get the first feedback here. And it's like, what are you looking for specifically? Are you looking to create a Safi prose novel? Are you looking to bring Chloe Price back? Are you looking to make Max feel more authentic? You might be asking all these questions, but it's like, what do the questions actually relate to, and how is it really going to impact the project?
Yeah, well, we don't know what the product is for that they're doing that focus group for, but typically the people who are motivated to respond to those types of surveys, and I'm talking about just like web-based surveys, are people who really, really like your product, or people who really, really hate it. So you're going to get 2 sides of the coin here. But yeah, that's a good point. Like, we don't know what the focus group was in correspondence to. So it might be for a graphic novel or whatever else.
It also depends on where the coin lands as well. As you said, you have that coin toss. It depends on where it lands. So it's like, do you take the feedback on? Do you not take it back on? And then also as well, like, that feedback, I assume, would be for the general perception of the franchise as a whole. Because obviously Square would want to have a strategy going forward. Oh, we'll do a prose novel, and we might do a comic, and we might do that. But then it's like, what feedback are you looking at? Someone might be like, looking at the feedback, and they'd be like, okay, that person hates Amanda. This person loves Amanda. This person likes Amanda. Oh, there's 2 people that like Amanda here. We'll get rid of that feedback. And cool, we'll actually keep her at this point. Or they could be like, okay, Loretta seems a bit annoying here. We don't like her. But we also love her. And someone even here says that Loretta could be a love interest for Safi.
Matt. For Safi.
Well, I'm just using it as I'm just throwing it away as
every character gay, just to clarify here.
Oh, yeah, they could do that as well. They could be like, oh yeah, actually, let's do that. But it could be anything like that, couldn't it? It could even do that as well. For example, it could be like, oh, actually, this person really wants Safi to be Max's love interest. That's a good idea. And then there's 3 relaying responses saying, oh, we don't like that idea. We want Safi dead. And it's hang on a minute, what? And they're like, we might be like, maybe we kill Safi off again. That's the level of that's the level of focus group feedback we can get. So it's I'm kind of it's not really going to help you. And also as well, I once typed it on Reddit as well, the Life is Strange subreddit C surveys. The amount of times they've sent a survey out about this franchise, and I sit there sometimes looking at them I'm like, and I've said this before on the podcast. Square Enix doesn't know what the franchise is anymore. That's basically in a nutshell. They don't know what the DNA of this franchise is anymore.
Yeah, you were talking about Adam, I saw.
And that's the biggest problem. Because if you can't understand what you're if someone said to me, what is Strangecast, I'd explain it to them. And Adam would give the exact same response because you've done it for that long and you know what the identity of that podcast is. As the same with your music. If anyone came up to you and said, Abby, what's your music? It's Sapphic based. It's got this kind of
It's just gay.
Well, what else is it? It's part of your. I'm joking. But you have a defined style, don't you? Though you don't. I don't see you dropping rap albums every
genre. But go on.
I'm trying to twine this in here. But you have a very specific style, which is guitar based. It's got this kind of element to it. It's not rap music. I don't listen to your music and I'm like, oh well, she's busting a rap here, like Blondie, and this track. It's well, you never know. That's when. 10 years from now, that's what's going to happen. I told Steph Trivison this. I said to her, when I have my mental health, my little crisis, I'm going to be dropping the biggest rap album of all time. But that's the thing. So it's they have defined styles. And my biggest question, I've said this quite a few times on the podcast, the biggest and most interesting question I could ever have about this franchise is if I could get into a room and I sit there and I'm sat in the middle. I'm sat in a circle group, and Chris Floyd sat there with Web Pickers Guild before the Storm co-directors. You have Michelle Coe and Raoul Barbet, the Life is Strange 1 and 2 co-directors. You have Zach Garris sat there, and you have John Stauder sat there from True Colors and Double Exposure. And you said to them, tell me what the Life is Strange DNA is. You'd have a different response from each person. That's how out of sync it would be, in my opinion. I think some of it would overlap. But I 100% bet you that, for example, what Stauder thinks the series is so much more different from what Michelle thinks it is. And that's because of the time difference of how the series has evolved. It's that's where we're at with Life is Strange. So I'm kind of sitting here you just do the podcast. I'm like, please don't kill this franchise.
Yeah. I mean, that should be the starting place where Square Enix's R&D team should have all of those folks involved whom you just listed write a sentence about what, or a paragraph about what you think the essence of this game is, and then do a thematic analysis on it and get to the kind of middle ground.
Yeah. That you need to have basically you need to be in unison with it. So it's when we do the podcast, even this podcast is unscripted, but we have an idea of what we're going to talk about. I.e., for example, this Lost Records, we know what we're going to talk about. But I've always said as well, with the way that Double Exposure ended, for example, if I walked into Deck 9 or I walked into Square Enix and put every single person in front of me, it'd be like Satan in front of them, in my opinion. They'd be like, oh my God, he's here. But if I sat them all down and I gave them a piece of paper and a pen and I said, tell me who killed Safi in this game and don't confer with each other, would you get one universal answer on that?
I think so. Well, but Max killed Safi because she wanted the cycle to end. I mean, that's what I got, right? No?
Well, what happens though in that though? Max kills Safi, yes?
Right.
And then what does Max do after that? She goes back to stop the cycle.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So Safi is still dead. So who killed Safi then? Was it a third Max? Was it alt Max that killed her?
I mean, we do have that alternative universe with, or timeline, whatever you want to call it, with the Polaroids. So that's another
Yes.
saving grace that they built in. What I do appreciate about this writing team, though, is that they built in a lot of fail safes. So they have that third universe. They have the fact that the two universes are combined, along with whatever other universes we don't know about. Yeah, they gave a lot of outs.
I think they had to, based on what I know about this project. I think they had to do that.
Well, then that's good writing.
Well, more so from the fact that they had to try and build outs on the way that this game was like manufactured, the way it looks as well, and the way it's presented. Because, like, for example, that's the logical thing. Someone would jump in the comments saying, well, this is how you explain it. But ultimately, if I'm sitting here and whilst we did spoiler casts and other people did spoiler casts, we all kind of sat there on different points being like, well, and we're all like, what? That doesn't make sense. That does not explain. So it's like with Max, for example, yes, the original idea is that Max kills Safi to stop that. Then later in the game, we get into our Max, and Max goes back into the photo, but doesn't shoot Safi, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, that stops that cycle. Yet, Safi is still dead in our timeline. So who kills Safi? You have another timeline that's running where Polaroids are being dropped, and it's telling a different story. Where is the Max in the other timeline when we go from from the living timeline to the dead timeline?
Yes.
So what happens to that other Max?
Too.
And but is the dead world Max the one that jumped back into the Polaroid? It was the one that killed Safi in the first place. Hence why she's not in there. So she's obviously killed Safi and doing some other things. So that's why she's not shown there. Or is it the alt Max that's done it, who's killed Safi and we haven't seen it? So can you see what's happening here? I'm causing confusion because I don't have a concise answer. Instead, when you do space-time continuums and paradoxes and stuff, you watch Terminator. Oh, John Connor sent his dad back from the future to save his mom, and that's how he's born. So we all know that Kyle Reese is John Connor's father. Spoilers for someone. You watch Terminator, then you've been lost. But from the one film you watched in the first Terminator film, you know the entire point of that. It makes sense that John Connor sent his father back in time to save him, and it creates the circle that happens. Nothing else needs to be added. With this game, that's not happened. And you're right as well, because they did have fail-safes that in the story where it's like, there is a third timeline, there's Polaroids, but it's that problem where the threads get dangled, and it's like nothing starts to connect because they had to get the story out and they had to get it done. So it's like when you watch it as well, it's like in the marketing Square Enix did. Do you remember all the marketing we watched last year? Mm-hmm. They did all the profiles, for example, and they're like suspect number 1, suspect number 2, suspect number 3, electing these characters. But not even they knew who killed Safi at that. Like, they didn't actually give a suspect video where that person killed Safi. And I think there's one moment in the marketing, they even say as well, it's like Max has to work against time to stop this killer from striking in both timelines.
It doesn't have to work against time. It's linear.
But the way they phrase it, they're like Max is in a race against time to stop the killer from striking in both timelines. And it's like, is the killer striking in both timelines?
Yeah, the killer, not necessarily she, but they set up that whole thing with the cow and then never finished it.
This is what I mean. So it's like, if I went back and played it, I would be able to construct certain parts of this game where I'd be like, okay, I have more of a clear explanation from that. And I think it does need 3 or 4 playthroughs where you start figuring out things and connecting with them. Ultimately, though, and as far as I know, there was no logical connections here. So it's like that story, for example, with who is Safi's killer isn't resolved. So people just don't know who that is. And it's like, all the theories I've read online where it's like someone said it's alt Max or it's this Max, I'm like, you're just connecting dots here because the writers didn't complete that story. That is not logically explained because you have to explain that. It's a central point to the story. It's like, imagine if we were writing a murder mystery, me and you, and Adam's the killer, right? So that's the story we're telling. But Adam goes back in a photo and stops the murder from happening, but the murder suspect's still dead. And you'd be like, hang on a minute, who killed the murder suspect then? Because if Adam is the killer and he's gone back and stopped the crime, how is this person still dead? What's happened here?
Well, yeah. So let's talk through this because there are, I assume, as many Maxes as there are available timelines with Max in existence. So,
That
like,
would be
when
the belief,
Max,
yes.
yeah. So when Max switches between Dead World and Living World, does another Max from another timeline come in? Because, like, we know that she's interacting with the characters in some capacity through the text and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like, while Max is not present in that timeline. And we know that
Yes.
she, like, disappears in the literal view of others when she goes across timelines. So, like, is Max just, like, leaping between timelines? And how do we know that they're all good Maxes and making the right choices for her? It's weird, but then, like, they save it at the end and basically none of it matters because it's all combined, so there's only one Max in the end.
Have you ever played Bioshock Infinite?
No.
I won't mention it now
I
because that explains it better. For example, what happens there, where you're trying now to apply logic to what logic doesn't exist, because it's like what you're saying there is like you're now questioning the different Maxes. You're questioning, is a good Max there? Is a bad Max there? What happens to this Max? What happens to that Max? If you create a can of worms, you have to tell what's happening here. You have to think about every scenario. So it all has like a dangling effect. You can't just leave unanswered questions there. So it's like with that point in the story when we're sitting there with Max, and it's like, okay, so cool. She jumps back in time with her powers, and she keeps doing it, and she like stops this. Well, Safi's still dead, and it's like even with the story, the way the story goes in the game, it changes so radically by the second half of the game, and we get to the end of the story. It's like Max doesn't really like care that much about like the first Safi being like her Safi being dead. It's because the story goes on a completely different tangent and route, but this core central theme is never addressed because you build it as a kind of like, oh, it's a murder mystery game. And it's the same with like True Colors. It's like we need to figure out how did Gabe die, and by the end of True Colors, we know why Gabe died. We know who killed Gabe as well, or who was responsible of it in that situation. This game doesn't have that. And it's like the only thing that you get is when we have the moment with the photo with Max when she sees it, and it's like, okay, Max killed her. But then Max goes back in time and tries to stop the murder. She stops it successfully. But what happened here? And you start like connecting dots. And it's like, as you said, there's fail safes built in the game, but none of them start connecting. So it's like fail safes that's here, which feel like they've been built in because they needed to do them, but no one's connecting the dots. So you leave unanswered questions. So like every time I've seen someone try and explain it to me, I'm like, that's interesting you're saying that, but I know for a fact that that's not what the developers said or what they were thinking. It's like, that is just not simply it. You're connecting the dots for them because there's no logic here that actually makes sense. It's like, it could have worked, but they didn't connect the dots. So that's where we're at with the game with that. And I know completely over a tangent into this thing, but it's like, this is the thing with the game where it's like, I'm not, again, trying to like, I've always said this before. We've done like a 2-hour podcast. If you want to go and listen to the review and stuff, it's like that's where you're going to get the most unhinged experience of the entire life. But these are the issues you have with it, and it's like for me, and I heard it so many times when I was learning about this game, and people are like, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, a little bit here because I'm like, what were you trying to achieve here? Because you could have told those morality questions. That's what would have been interesting. That would have been an interesting experience if an evil Max met a good Max. How do they think of each other if they walked into each other? And and in itself as well. Before one thing I will notice as well, one of my favorite points about this game is because obviously we're limited in terms of the technical performance of this game. I love that in the game. Fair enough, because like when you do the splits, they're in strategic places, so it's like it's out of sight. The one in the snapping turtle always gets me, and the one that's in front of the restroom. It's like, yeah, and it's like, imagine the person that's sitting in the booth behind Max being like, they're just eating their dinner. They'd be like, what's going on there? I'm like, put it anywhere else. Like, open the girl's bathroom up. Like, open the door up and like let her walk in and rip and do the shift.
Yeah.
Like, why is it in the public view of it? I get it, it's technical limitations, but that one, that one's a very poor one that they put in a strategic place. I'm like, come on, man.
Well, they never explain why the pulse points are where they are either. Because like they're not all discrete either. I mean, I know that they are placed so that we can move around the environment in a way that they would like us to play the story in. But yeah, like that should be better explained. Like with rewind, you can do it anywhere, any place, because it's not contingent on like some external force being available.
It's a simple power as well, rewind. You don't have to do anything else with it. It's just the idea is rewinding time. So she just rewinds time. But as you said as well, that's never explained. So why can she only strategically do it in here? The reason for it is it's gameplay purposes. So it's just baked in there. But they never give a reason saying that, oh, she has this thing with it. It's like she can sense pulses and stuff. She can sense other people in other timelines. But they never say to you why there's 2 pulses in strategic places. And they do it in certain cases because obviously we talked about it when during the chase sequence with Max. It's like so she can like overcome certain obstacles. But it's like you never really give a clear explanation for it. So it's kind of a bit disappointing for that. Cause it's like, hang on a minute, you need to kind of explain her powers. You've just given her a new power. It's like we need to get really to the grips of this and explain why she has it and kind of like tap into the lore of that. But again, it's just like surface level. So I'm kind of like a bit like, I will go back and play this game at some point this year. I know someone said it to me, like, you know, I can't believe going back and try and see different perception. I'm going back to see it because something there about this game. I'm like, you know, it just, I get why you enjoy it as well. I get why you saw good points in it. It goes across as insult, does it?
You know what I like it.
But no, I got it. Like even the last conversation that we had, and you talk about the thematic plot points, where it's you know about the idea that you do feel like if you're an LGBTQ plus person that you can kind of get pushed down on, and then Safi has this reason for going the way she does, and it was fair points that you made as well. Because I was like, actually, that's an interesting perspective to be told. But then it was like, and I was like, but it's this and this and this. Do you like all the little dangling points that are left behind on it? And I'm like, if you had got to that final checkpoint and you had resolved all this, maybe we would have seen that and we would have all felt fine with it. And it's like, I struggled to get to that point because when I played the game and they did the Chloe decision, I think I said in the last podcast, I mentally checked out, but I also sat there thinking, like, you have a chance here to keep me going because I'm also interested to see what the story is with the characters breaking up and what the story is there. But they didn't do that because the game's so linear. It was like, and Vin Lang's pushing on top of me, and then Amanda's a love interest. And I'm like, hang on a minute. Why is my story not about her sorrow and her grief? Like, just pure sorrow and grief and nothing more than that. That they just feel nothing more than that. It's like, yeah, we'll bring a love interest into it. And it's like, oh, I'm like, no, it shouldn't have happened like that. They should have gone really ballsy with the timelines and be like, it's fixed. If you go with this situation with Chloe being broken up with you, you don't have a love interest in that story route. Your story is about sorrow and grief and pain and etc. It is telling a story about a couple who's broken up. Instead, I can basically go and, you know, tongue Vin Lang on the bar instead, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well, okay. Also, in terms of love interests for this upcoming game that we assume is going to be happening,
oh,
like how interesting would it be, especially because they love to bring in like these issues of consent and stuff, and this is kind of going in a opposite direction, but wouldn't it be interesting if Safi changed into like Chloe or Amanda in order to be closer to Max?
see, look, my idea for this game. I know some people have hated this idea, but that's your opinion. If you want to make the game yourself, do it. My idea is as well is that if you bring a shapeshifter into the game, why is she like randomly appearing as these little fringe characters? So that would have been a fascinating story. You could literally have told the entire story about the fact that Safi is solely responsible for breaking up Max and Chloe. She becomes Chloe and dresses up as her.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that would be interesting.
Because they allude to it in the entire game of like, they alluded to it obviously in the nightmare sequence with like, you know, Chloe fighting with Max, it's like, oh, it's Safi because she's got a Porsche, etc. It's like, my game, if I was going to tell this, in my opinion, and this is because I love Metal Gear Solid 5, and if you play it, you know it, I would have told this entire story as Safi pretending to be Max.
Yeah.
So the entire story, as a shapeshifter, because it makes sense, because why else are we going to have a shapeshifter who's playing as other characters? So my thing would have been that Safi has met Max Caulfield at some point and has taken a really big liking into her as a personality. There's something about Max that attracts her, her powers, etc., whatever it is. And she's also at fault for breaking up Chloe Price. So it's that she becomes Max at some point and breaks those two characters up, does something with it. And the story is built around Safi posing as Max at Caledon to figure out what happened to Maya Okada, because Maya Okada was her good friend. So the idea is, obviously, you know about Safi, but Safi has left town.
They
Whatever
can
it is, like,
totally do that. They completely can't, because what if Max actually did mean to kill Safi and Safi has her tied up in a room somewhere?
See, that's what I mean. So there's still options for it, but it's like, my story would have been that. It would have been like, Safi knew, basically, what Maya Okada is in the main game, that's what Safi is. So basically, the game is Safi posing as Max Caulfield coming back to Caledon to figure out what happened to Maya Okada. And we get references throughout the game of who Safi is. It's that Safi was her best friend and she was struck by grief and she left. And that Yasmin is the president and she's Safi's mum. And it's like, she tells you more about Safi, but obviously you are Safi. So in itself, by the end of the game, my reveal would have been the fact that you are Safi. Because at that point, it explains why Max is out of character, why she acts really weird. It would still be played by Hannah Tell. It'd be like, and in itself as well, she probably would have won awards for this, because it'd be like, actually, she's playing a character that she's actually not. So the reveal adds to the flavor of it. So that's how the game ends with it, where it reveals that Safi is actually Max.
Oh.
And then there's concept art in the game, in the books. There's one where it shows Max running for a train. I would have ended the game, if I'm going off what they've done, if anything, I'm trying to base on what they've done. I would have ended the game revealing that Safi is Max, and that it gives you exposition that she had done all this stuff. So she basically grown an attraction to Max because she has a power. She saw Chloe and she didn't like her, so she sabotaged that, and she has all these domino effects happen. And at the end of the game, I would have ended with Safi doing whatever she does, etc. And I would have ended with a train pulling up to Caledon University, and it comes out with Max climbing off the train. And depending on how the game ends as well, either one ending is just Max on her own, or the other one is with Chloe behind her. And then you have that like massive graphic where it says Max Caulfield will return. And I would have had it saying Max Caulfield will return. And at the beginning, I would have had white text fading into appearance where it says the real Max Caulfield will return. And that's how I would have ended the game. Okay. Whether that sucks.
A moment of silence for how fucking smart that is. I mean, that deserves.
I thought it sucks. A lot of people think it will suck. That's how I would have done the game. I think that subverts all expectations. Even in games I've played, for example, even Assassin's Creed 3. Have you played Assassin's Creed 3?
Have I played anything, Adnan?
Well, in itself, I'm not going to ruin that. Like, in Assassin's Creed 3, again, you subvert expectations. One of the biggest twists to happen in the entire series. Like, wow. I played twists where I'm like, wow, this is it. That's how I would have done the game. Whether that sucks for a lot of people, it probably does. Some people probably think that's such a crap idea.
People want to play as Max.
Yeah, but like, for me, that's what I would have done, because I think you would have thrown everyone for a loop. Because it's like, this is why Max is out of character. This is why she's acting strange. She's acting this way because she is not actually Max Caulfield. And in itself as well, the big question for me with that, when you make the game as it is, and what I would be telling through commentary is, do you really know who Max Caulfield is? Because if you believe that was Max Caulfield, it makes me question that you really know who Max Caulfield is. So I would have been lacing that through the entire story, saying, I've just basically spent the entire game showing you that shapeshifter is Max Caulfield, but I'm also questioning the fact that you believe that this was Max Caulfield, because it's not her, because she doesn't show as many traits. And you could have had stumbling moments where, for example, here's the other thing. If shapeshifter Safi was Max, it explains why she's not trauma linked to Jefferson, because it's like, she doesn't actually experience that. She knows of him by name. But in the story, for example, when you get to the darkroom sequence and she acts out to it, you could just be like, that's why none of the rest of the story has any reference to Jefferson into it, mainly. You could have those kind of explanations for it. That's the story I would have personally told. If I was going to tell the story and approach it, that's how I would have done it. I know other people have done it differently. We all have our good fanfics in our head. We all have our bad fanfics. If I was going to approach it based on what they were doing, that's how I would have told it.
Yeah.
It makes sense in my head if I was repackaging parts of the story, because you explain so much of it. For me, the big message I would want to say is we are in 2025, 2024, and you love nostalgia, and we brought Max Caulfield back, but we're also asking you, do you really know what nostalgia is? And secondly, as well, again, that big question is like, do you really know Max Caulfield? Because I've just basically duped you for an entire game because I've told you that Max Caulfield's coming back, but it actually wasn't her, though. It was actually a shapeshifter who was pretending to be her. And then you believed, for example, that she had changed in this personality. It's like, no. It explained why Max is out of character in the game. That's how I personally would approach it. I'll have someone in the comments saying you suck or something. But I think like but like that, I think it's logical though for the game to do that, because like, as you just kind of, and to kind of hijack what you said before, it's like you're saying like she shapeshifts into this person, she shapes like, why wouldn't she shapeshift into like Chloe Price, for example, or like Max Caulfield, and do more with it, if anything, and tell those stories? For me, it'd be make more interest, because like if Safi shapeshifts into Max and goes back to Kaladin, she can speak to her mum and then find out what actually happened to Maya Okada, because Safi's mum isn't going to tell her properly what happened to it. She could find out via Lucas. So, for example, that entire sequence you get in the game where Lucas just makes the admission to Safi being like, well, this is what happened with, Maya and your book deal, etc. I can't really remember off the top of my head, but it's like when he makes the admission to her in the Snapping Turtle. What happens if that sequence, for example, is Lucas making the admission to Max Caulfield at that point, but it's actually Safi? So it's Safi learning because she's not actually getting straight up told from it. You have a shapeshifter.
Yeah, they didn't
use it
to the full ability.
No, it's a good reveal at the end of chapter 3, 4.
It's 3 where they're on the ice.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 3.
Chapter 3. Yeah, sorry. My mind's going blank in this game. Chapter 3. Do you want to reveal it? It's actually like, oh, that's interesting. Had we not known about the data leaks and stuff like that, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But then it's like, it doesn't really have much more purpose to that. So it's like, you've done it for that sudden impact. For me, I've set the game up from the beginning as Safi being the shapeshifter. At the end of the game, I reveal it to you. And you'd be sitting there, be like, what? That's the reaction I would want to be like, what? And it's like, for me, I've laced commentary on it. I'll give you a scrambled idea. I'd have to sit down and properly write what I'd want to do, but I'm thinking in like the parameters of what I'm working in. That's how I do it. You tell an interesting story from me, in my perspective, because that's what happened when I played Metal Gear Solid 5. I'm going to spoil that for people. When you play the character and you're like, hang on a minute, what? And it starts to reveal it. It's like, ooh, it's asking you big questions about what you actually knew and what you expected from someone, because you're not actually playing as who you think you are. And it's like, and it's creating adding the layer of the history of the character, etc. I could spend about 5 hours talking about Metal Gear Solid 5 and Metal Gear in general, but it's like, that's the thing for me. It's like, build something into it, build a purpose of the commentary into it. And if I was going to make the game, that's what I would tell. For other people, it might not work. It might not even work in a Life is Strange game, personally speaking, but that's how I'd see it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd write it any differently. Like, I mean, if you wanted to write a game a bit differently, it's like...
Yeah, I mean, I think I would make the shapeshifting a bit more subversive, and I think that they were kind of like towing the line and being a little conservative with like what kinds of stories were being told. I could see that also with some of the commentary on True Colors, like they were being very cautious about things. But I think that even the breakup with Chloe can be resolved by just saying, oh, Safi was pretending to be Chloe, and that's why they had that fight, and that's why they were broken up. So there are lots of things that can be done, and I hope that it's a little more daring, I would say, in the upcoming installment. I don't know.
I would argue you have to be daring in the next game.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but
sorry, I have crazy ones in the background.
And we're used to them being on the podcast. I would argue on your point where it says like they have to be a bit daring. I think they have to be daring now. Because of like where they're at now. Do you like what the game is at and the way it's being received? I think you have to like really, toss the coin at it, like throw everything at it, roll the dice at this point, because it's like, it could turn out 50 times worse, but you are literally at like here at the expectation. So it's like, if you can try and do that, amazing. If it goes down here, then well, that's where the damage is irreparable beyond belief. But it's like, if you roll the dice, then maybe you could do something. But it's like, even that idea where you said like she could shapeshift in Chloe, just do it in the freaking game. In the first one that we just played, then double exposure. At least you build a failsafe in. You just said before about the writers building failsafes in. That would have been a failsafe in the game at that moment, at least, without having to retcon stuff or something else with it. You could have built a failsafe into the game at that point, but they didn't do that.
Yeah.
Like,
I would hope that this new writing team is not afraid to be perceived as offensive. Let's put it that way.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I hope that someone has a backbone on that writing team, and especially the director's chair, because they need to push back on Square and be like, you need to let us have freedom to make this game now, and like really attack what we need to do, like in terms of, as you said, be really daring and really kind of like be like, we're not afraid to do this, because it's like we need to kind of address these issues now, because like you boxed yourself into other corners. So even like my Safi idea doesn't really work now in a future game, or it's like, you know, you try and do other things. It's like, but then someone's going to be like, well, oh, you've just done a cheap retcon there to kind of explain why Safi and Max have broken up, even though there's like maybe a trickle that you've left in the first game in a nightmare sequence. It's like, doesn't really cut through with people. So it's like, these are the liberties that were taken advantage of from the stepping stone that was double exposure, and we're at where we're at right now. So it's like, you know, there you go. So I've read other people's theories, and it's all good. Like in itself, my idea might just be like Square be like, no, that we don't like that idea. I'm like, great, fantastic.
Yeah, but
like,
it would absolutely hit on Archive of Our Own.
Oh God, yeah. Oh dear. Well, I'm proud of the fanfic that I wrote in my head until someone calls me out in the comments. I'll be joyful from that. But like, you know, someone's gonna say it. Might be Adam as well. It'd be funny if he just comments saying "you suck," and I'm like, well, that sums it up. It's hard. It's hard to write it, and also as well, like I've read some really great ideas for like how people would address it, and it's a fair point. Then I'm also like, okay, but what does Square have to say about that? Because if your idea is great as it is, and anyone's like, I could write this story from it, again, you have to factor in that you're working under a publisher which has its own direction on the entire story, what it wants to tell. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, as you also let us know in the comments what you think about my idea. Does it suck? Does Abby suck? Let us know. We love these comments as well. Yes,
Are we
what's that?
I'm kidding. We should touch on the comments too before we wrap up.
We didn't even talk about Lost Records.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we haven't even talked about Lost Records. I don't have much to say because honestly, I have wanted to go into the game blind, just as I did with the original Life is Strange. And I only know what has been officially released. I haven't seen any theories or like anything else. Yeah.
Do you know what? Here's a fun thing for you. You should watch the theories episode me and Adam did on that game before it was even announced. There's a Strange Cast episode where me and Adam talked about the theories on Lost Records Boomer Rage, and some of it has aged quite scarily well, to be honest. I'm not going to lie. Just off the top of my head, we were making some quite out there ideas, and some of it does turn out to be quite accurate about Lost Records Boomer Rage. So it's one for you to check out. You haven't really missed much, to be honest. There's like little bits that are being explained here and there. The overarching game is still quite hidden at this point, which I like as well. And as you said, it's like the Life is Strange-esque vibe. But you should just be interested in it, if anything. That's the main thing. I think you'll enjoy it.
I am really interested. I'm happy to play. Not happy. I'm excited to play. And then I guess the second episode isn't being released until April. What is the like volume, I guess? Because I heard that like the second volume or whatever is not being released until April. So does that just mean
tape?
Tape. Okay.
Yes. So they are releasing this as 2 parts. So the game is released as 2 parts. So they're releasing it as Tape 1, which is called Bloom, and then Tape 2, which is called Rage.
Gotcha.
So that's the idea of it. So it's basically, they've said the game is around 10 to 12 hours playtime. I would probably say about 15 hours or so if you're going to explore and stuff. Makes sense. So you're basically going to have like, imagine it'll probably be like, Tape 1 will probably be like the equivalent of episode 1, 2, and 2.5 in Life is Strange 1, and then Tape 2 will be 2.5, the other half of episode 2, 3, 4, 5, or something like that. I don't know, I've worked that in the maths, but it's like, it'd be along those lines. So imagine like the expectation will probably be like there's a dramatic cliffhanger at the end of this first tape. and then obviously it'll set up for what happens in the second tape. As far as I'm aware, I believe the timelines run. You have one timeline. So obviously you have the 1995 timeline off the top of my head. I'm taking like a lot of Lost Records information on top of my head at the minute. So you have a 1995 timeline and then a 2022 timeline. Yeah, that's 27 years. Yeah. So you have a 1995 timeline, 2022 timeline, and then I believe the story is told interchangeable in the timeline. So you'll see adult story, past story, but the past story is where the main game is told. So it's like what happens there. That's going to be your gameplay narrative standpoint. So yeah, there's a lot of things that have been talked about the games. I don't think you're gonna, even if you call up on everything, I don't think you'd feel anywhere near spoiled. I think it'd be more if you went and looked at theories, if anything. You might get a bit like, ooh, I might be hitting on something. But generally speaking, it's an interesting game. It's not. One of the things I think might be interesting to see how it is perceived is how people who really love Life is Strange look at this game, because for me at the moment, it looks more like Oxenfree-esque game. Have you played Oxenfree?
I know the game, yeah.
Yes, there we go. I got one. Yeah, it screams more of that, because at the moment as well, it seems like there's no powers. And a lot of the kind of like game is told through Swan's camera and how she uses the camera. So it's like, it'll be interesting because I don't know if it's a spiritual successor. I've kind of stopped using that word with Lost Records. I think Lost Records is its own thing, but just under the guise of the creators of Life is Strange. So yeah, I would keep an eye on it though. It's definitely not one to sleep on. It's definitely one for you to kind of watch. I don't think you'll be anywhere near none the wiser for what happens. I think more so you'll probably get more spoiled for stories after the first tape's out, because obviously then they'll start talking about things to kind of build up the hype for it.
Yeah, it's kind of giving me a Stranger Things vibe from the trailers I've seen. Yeah. I think it's kind of like going off of that success, that kind of storyline.
Yeah. So. Stranger Things, Yellow Jackets, Goonies-esque. It's mashing all those things with it. Michelle said like inspirations include like It, for example. So it's an inspiration for it. Anything that's along those lines is like, it's going to be that. So Stranger Things isn't that far off either from the mark as well. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens from it. I'm excited for the game. I've obviously been excited for the game, but I'm interested to see what happens, because there's, for me, a lot of expectation on this game for Don't Nod. And, considering what's happening at the minute at the studio and stuff, it's like, I wish them nothing but the best of luck with that, because building an IP awareness is very, very freaking difficult, especially in this climate of games as well. So, best of luck to them, but we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah. We'll certainly be buying it and talking about it.
Of course, yes. I'll always be here talking about it. I'm a menace to everyone, good or bad, for different reasons. Yeah, I do wonder if like some people just sometimes come here and wonder if like I sit at home throwing like darts at a picture of myself on a dartboard, but like I'm not actually that kind of person. I'm just like look, when I come across as it as well, I'm like, I've seen enough in my life where I'm like, I don't pander to something if it's not good. I only expect good things in my life now. It's like if I'm watching a TV show, I'm not going to watch 2 seasons for it only to get better in the 3rd and 4th season. I expect it to be good from minute 1. And the same with Lost Records. I hope Lost Records is good. I'm optimistic about it because I believe it looks original. It's something I'm like, oh, that's actually quite nice with it. Heaven forbid, as some people might not believe, I even went with an open mind on Double Exposure, and I had heard horrific things before the game even came out about it. And I was like, it can't be as bad as I think it's going to turn out. And in my opinion, it was worse than what I thought as well. And I was like, and I went in with an open mind thinking like, maybe I should like kind of go in there. And it's like, no, I'm not having that. So it's like, I didn't enjoy it. But again, I've always said to people, if you enjoyed it, great. And it's a shame because obviously like, I feel like I'm probably alienating people who have stuck with the channel for as long as they have, but then don't want to come on here because of negative Nancy is like throwing around things. And it's like, we are what we are, I don't like certain things that some people enjoy.
You're talking about we. I said nothing but nice things and a couple of weird things.
Wow. We all, opinions are like buttholes. We all have one. That's as simple as it gets.
Not everyone.
So yeah, I'm excited for it, but I'm like, I would not want to be in their shoes. It's what's happening at Don't Nod at the minute in terms of like with the strikes and stuff and the reorganization projects and potential layoffs and the hope and dreams on Lost Records, and then you compare it to what's happening at Deck 9 with Double Exposure. I am happy that I can sit here as an armchair pundit talking to Abby and talking to Adam in my little echo chamber and not have to deal with any of it, because I have nothing to lose from it. It's as simple as that. I have nothing to lose from it. So it's like, it's no fear and anything on my back from it. So it's like, it's fine for me, but it's like, I do sit there thinking like, you guys have got a tough gig, both studios, to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else on Lost Records?
No, I'm excited to play.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
Question, wasn't it originally scheduled for end of January?
It was scheduled for last year, but then Double Exposure announced. And then they announced these new release dates. So it was February 18th and March 18th. So tape 1 came out in February 18. Tape 2 came out in March 18th. But what they've done now is that tape 1 still comes out in February 18. Tape 2 has been delayed. Tape 2 has been delayed off the top of my head to April 15, I believe it is. So it's been pushed back from about a month-ish. Tape 2. So it's not...
It was always February for the first... Yeah. Okay.
So we're at that point at this point. So, Double Exposure kind of knocked out the 2024 window, which is a shame. So we're now going to have to wait for it this year. So, and we're literally around the corner from it. So it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Excited for it nonetheless. So that's that. Right. Any other last business?
No.
You don't want to address the comments? Or you changed your mind?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. I wanted to say that we very much appreciate our community here. And we would like to keep it more positive.
Well, that told you that, didn't it?
Yeah.
See, for me, I felt for you as well, because, like, for me, it don't bother me. Because, like, ultimately, I have really Marmite opinions. And also, as well, because of my line of work as a journalist, I do come across as really pompous. I also do come across as really self-righteous. I come across as a lot of things.
Yeah, you do. I don't.
Well, welcome to putting your opinion out on the internet, because you're going to get people who don't like it and do like it as well. And that's the simple fact of it. As I said before, someone might jump in the comments and say, you suck at giving an idea of Safi. And I'm like, cool, because I'm not a writer and I don't care. I'm just putting my opinion out there, just as anyone else can as well, in terms of their story. And I might even turn around and be like, that sucks. Usually I don't, because I'm like, actually, I'm a little bit more, I'm just a bit more of a human being. I'm going to be like, I'm not going to like really criticize it necessarily speaking, but I'm not very shy to put my opinions out there, because I do it for my livelihood. I also write opinion pieces in my journalism thing. And again, if you don't like my opinion, doors over there. And it's like, I'm not going to pander to you as well. I hope people come here and find value in it, because we do incorporate our community's feedback in different podcasts and different conversations, because they're all welcome for it. And I've not really had that many confrontations with people in the comments, barring a very few exceptions of it. And I'm like, I don't really want you here, because you're not actually adding anything for me to say constructively here. You're pointing at me being like, ha, 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 I told you that I said this. And it's like, well, you're just saying it now because you might have thought something 20 minutes ago, but I can't say it. But difference is with me, I've put my opinion online and I've gone out there and put my stance out there. So like, I can't change my ha, 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 ha kind of opinion because it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, when I saw comments, I'm like, whatever, like, that's it. And I'm not going to change my way of style of that. And the same with Adam as well. I've learned more from Adam, if anything, about comments than I have in my entire life, which is the fact that you own what happens to you. And it's like with him as well, people have said things about it and he will bark back at you. It's like Pennsylvania man. It's like, I would not want to go after him, because he's just, you've seen enough of it in itself as well. Like Adam tells me about the stories when he was like, working in youth pasture and stuff. And it's like, when you've seen enough in your life, why are you going to, what's that?
Isn't he Jewish?
Yeah. So
he was okay. That's a story for another time. But anyway, if you're thinking, Adam's going to come for you.
He will. Yeah. It was a youth pastor, wasn't it? Was it a youth pastor? Yeah, I'm definitely sure the youth pastor. Yeah, he's got quite a few stories. As I said, like, it's quite fascinating to that story. No, but like, honestly, like, because for me, I've never really had that many problems with the comments ever, because I like hearing other people's opinions, because their opinions are opinions, aren't they? And you, my friend, especially in the double exposure series season, got the full brunt of it because we dealt with a lot of that period because we got comments which were like up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
Look, in itself as well, like one of the things I'll say as well when people said whatever they did about you and you reacted the way that you did as well, I'm like, for me, whatever your decisions are ultimately, and if you feel like you've changed your stance, not really, because in the conversation you were saying, you still had issues with everything else that's happened in between it. You were just more open to a certain idea that they were throwing about in terms of Safi and Max. You were like, actually, that's a good idea of it. And it's nice to be passionate about something you like, for example, i.e. like Max and Chloe. But at the end of the day as well, you didn't create them. So for example, like imagine if Michelle came out and said like, I think Max and Chloe do this as their future, where they go off together in this journey. And you're like, no, my headcanon thinks this and you're wrong. It's like, wait, you're telling the creator of the two characters you're like really like infatuated with that he's wrong about it? The guy who made it? It's like you might fall in love with something, but you don't own it. So it's like you have no right to tell someone else like how they're going to dictate their product just because they've never done that. It's like I find it a bit strange.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you could say something.
Oh no, I mean, like, I thought I made it clear. Chloe's probably my favorite character ever across like any media.
Yeah.
So I'm not happy to see her go, but I also really like Safi's character, and I really liked Olivia's performance. So I don't know. I was just expressing that I liked it, and also I want to say for the record, what?
There's nothing wrong with that.
I know, that's what I'm saying. But yeah, and also we should express that like you and I are friends in real life too. We talk all the time, so it's
Are
like
we? I don't know if we're friends.
I don't know. Did Safi take over your voice messages? And but yeah, we gab all the time. We like I'm just a quieter person by nature, I guess. So like when
Yeah.
you're talking and I'm listening, like it's not because I don't want to listen. It's because I'm just a quiet person.
You work on your dynamics. And
Yes.
that's the main thing. And it's the same with this show. And it's the same with why Strange Castle works the way it does as well. You have to have the right dynamic of it. And people come for different opinions as well. Because it's like you have to get the nice yin and yang balance as well. Because I watch back the edits that I do, and sometimes I'm like, Abby, shut him up. It's like he won't stop talking, and it's like I'm like, why is she not saying anything? Because it feels like I've just gone on a 10-minute monologue. I've gone on a 10-minute monologue. And the same with Adam, like, please shut him up. Because like for me, and the way that I act as well, and especially on the spectrum, it's very difficult to kind of like read conversations, especially on like video calls. That's the other thing you have to remember as well, because sometimes we're on a delay. So when you see the wonderful studio quality version that you get, I'm like, and I'm like, oh God, am I? It's like, you don't see that. I'm like trying to preempt that she's about to stop, and it's like there's a little connection delay sometimes.
Yeah.
That's how dynamics work. I have very strong opinions. I firmly believe in my opinions, and I also write my own opinions. That's it. So for me as well, like I have full conviction behind my opinions because I make them myself and I don't go and read other people's opinions. And sometimes that will either come across really great for people, or sometimes they'll utterly despise it and dislike me for it. But that's fine. And it's the same with when you came on here, because you came on here despite all the stuff about double exposure when we were talking off podcasts and stuff. And you came on here and you're like, I enjoy the game, I like this. And not at one point did I ever say, Abby, you can't take that stance because we're doing this. I was like, welcome. Because it's good to have a different opinion on this conversation, because otherwise it sounds like me and Adam just agreeing like with each other like nodding dogs. And it's nice to have different opinions on it, because probably people come here who do like double exposure will hear you say nice things about it, but then I will also give a different perspective on it. Ultimately, comments don't bother me. They really don't. I've kind of got to thick skin state. I've like had a lot happen to my life, and I've had a lot of people say things to me. And you're not the first person to say it to me. You're not the last person to say it to me. I'm a very warm and friendly person, surprisingly. But yeah, in terms of our friendship, yeah, we talk like all the time. So it's like for me, it's just a normal conversation, and it's like that's how the dynamic will flow as it is. It's like you will chime in where you need to, and I will be monologuing away on certain things, and then hopefully we have the flow from there. Honestly, you get used to it. If anything, I think maybe your experience is a bit different as well, because you've had like I remember you telling me like you've had like stuff on social media where people have like said all kinds of like nasty stuff to you because of, you know, who you are,
Yeah,
etc.
I've had like a lot of homophobic cyberbullying, and like I've had like actual hatred videos. I don't know how to describe them, like hate videos, I guess, made about
Yeah, it's
me.
targeted bullying, it's cyberbullying, like
Yeah,
harassment.
because like also it's different as a woman on the internet. Like I feel like the comments are a little more piercing sometimes, but also all that ends well. We like our
It's
community here,
fair.
and it's
No,
fun.
I like them as well. I like them. I like Life is 2D. I loved Life is 2D.
Oh,
Got
love
kicked out.
Life is 2D.
um,
Love you.
but no, but that's the thing though, because I've funnily enough, I only mentioned on a recent podcast with Adam as well. It's like people don't even realize, like, I've had death threats sent against me because of what I do for my job,
You've
and
had
I've had people.
you?
Yeah, of course, so. Yeah, I've had death threats sent to me before.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I've had death threats sent to me. I've had people telling me to do things to myself, where it's like, you know, trying to do on YouTube regulations. I've had people send me abuse. I've sent people send me racism things. I've had people target me singly for it. But at the end of the day, like, this is why I'm just very much a thick skin for it. Cause it's like, perfect. Like, whatever. You don't like my opinion, great. You love Adam more than me, fantastic, great. I've had people say to me before, like I really like Adam more for his takes on the podcast. I'm like, God, it's like, what do you think I'm going to be offended that you like Adam's opinions more than mine? God, because he's probably more rational and grounded because he is that kind of person. And I'll do like mental gymnastics at times to try and make my own mind up sometimes. But it's like, God, you like his opinions.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone has their own palette, and it's like, you know, I saw on one of the other videos when we did it, and people are like, well, yeah, you and Abby and doing this, and I'm like, whatever. Don't come here. Don't watch the video. Go and find another podcast that does Life is Strange Things. Oh wait, they don't exist.
Aren't any.
No, they don't. And also as well, feel free to set one up as well, because like when you get to where we're at now, where it's 4 years in, and me and Adam have done 93 episodes of Strange Cast. Try and get one past 5 episodes, because most people don't get past 5. I think it's getting like the not. Me and Adam looked it up on Spotify. It's like it's getting to the 0.1% spot on podcasts, like the higher percentage. It's like you only have to do like 5 episodes or 3 episodes, because most podcasts just go offline after a little bit. That's run for 4 years now. It's coming 4 years this year, so it's like
Awesome.
to put time and effort into it, and then the motivation. And I'm not sitting here trying to belittle anyone here who comes here, because they're always wonderful and they've always given great opinions. And it's like I've always welcomed for people to give their opinions, because that's what's good from it. I just kind of give what I can do in terms of feedback. And in itself, I've kind of created this platform as a way for me to kind of create content that I would want to listen to. That's why I might not get loads of views that other people do, but it's like, it's what I want to do. I'm not a reactionary kind of guy. I'm not going to sit there reacting to something for just clicks and put my face screaming in the thumbnail, because it's like, I'm just not that kind of person. But it's true that it is difficult. It is, you kind of get used to it. But I think with when you got that message as you did, and at other points as well, I think like is because of how divisive Double Exposure was, if anything.
So true.
Because I had a lot of DMs with some people, and they're like, it feels like you're being really harsh on the game, and it feels like you know, I hope you're being nice to the actors and stuff like this. And it's like, you know, I'm playing a very fine line here of like how I'm trying to deal with this, because it's like when I come off my fence and I'm giving my personal opinion, it's like, you know, it's not seen as much. Like even Adam said it as well, when we do conversations, I'm very much sit on the fence on a lot of things. I sit, because that's my job. I sit on the fence on a lot of things. I only interject my opinion properly when I feel like it's for me to put my opinion in there. So we did it during the IGN Deck 9 piece. I sat on the fence because like, I had big questions about this. And it's like, I do have like a lot of questions about this. And I went and did digging on stuff like that. And I'm like, my beliefs were held right as well to sit on the fence on certain things. So it's like, I will sit on the fence for a lot of things, but it's hard. It's hard. It is hard. And I think if anything, for me, my personality as well, I think it's been built on the fact that I've done journalism for as long as I have. Because you do see different sides of things, where it's like you see the good and you see the bad. And I always joke with people as well, like, do you know what it's like in my line of work when I did it today, actually, funny enough as well. I sat in an Uber, and the Uber driver was like, what do you do? Like, when he was talking to me, and I was like, and I even like laughed at first. I was like, I'm a journalist. And he like, and the minute I did, he like looked at his mirror like that, and it's like, and I've had it so many times when I've done it with people, and they're like, and I'm like, don't worry, I'm not sitting here with a wire. Like, and it's like, it's not like the film. It's not, yeah, it's not like the movies. It's not like the TV shows. You get people's reaction all the time, don't they? Though you get it all the time. You imagine your life as well. Like, you could have a normal chilled out chat with someone that you meet, and imagine if you then present yourself as who you are, your personality, and who you actually are, and you're like, oh, I'm actually a lesbian, and they might be like, but they might do, because they might have an inherent prejudice, and then you have to deal with that.
Welcome to America.
Welcome to America in general, and then also welcome to the world, where like most parts of the world you'd go to, you'd get like, you know, absolutely like hated on because of who you are.
Well, and you think I look like this and not more serious?
True. But no, that's what I mean though. It takes one thing to change people's opinions. So yeah, ultimately it didn't bother me, but I know you like stop about the comments. So I was like, yeah, don't worry, we'll have space in the podcast for you to talk about them. So you can hear a little bit.
We talked about it.
Be positive, people. People need it as well, especially nowadays as well, where it's at. Even though we just basically spent a long part of the podcast bashing on double exposure. Anyway, I think we should wrap up here. Yes. Anything else to add? Any last admin bits?
No, this is great.
Okay, perfect. I think we should wrap up here then. So thank you for joining us. I know this is a bit of a longer fireside, but hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, even if you didn't, you should like the video, share with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications. It's the main thing to do as well. Then you can bash us in the comments as well. But yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments or any of the topics that you enjoyed. If you didn't enjoy them, if you think Abby's, you know, just attack her if you want to. No, I'm not saying.
Yeah, be really vicious next time. Give us something good to talk about.
Well, I'm going to unleash Adam on them as well, because I would usually send him comments. I'm like, this person's calling this person out, so Adam will come after you otherwise. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. As I said before, on the YouTube channel, go and check out our other content, podcasts, interviews, talks. If you are new here, welcome. Even though you somehow made it through that comment section that we just monologued about, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the content. Subscribe. You can keep up to date with all your content. Also follow us on social media. You get to keep up to date with everything that you need to know about the series, about Life is Strange. Don't Nod Montreal, Don't Nod, Deck 9, Square Enix, all of it is covered. So yeah, we'll be back next month for another podcast. So I hope you look forward to that. Until next time, see you later. Bye.